This month's game is hard as fuck. There will be spoilers for most boss fights, but I'll put up a proper spoiler warning before we unpack the story. Playthroughs are on the second channel as usual, and this time in multiple languages. Enjoy. I have a confession to make. I like me a good game. That, and my backlog is slowly destroying my life. Haha, just kidding. Furi is a boss fight video game, meaning that its combat consists solely of, well, boss fights. No trash mobs, no normal enemies, no mini-bosses, just a constant series of
1v1 me, bitch!
It's probably the hardest game I've beaten up to this point. The controls are tight, and so are your opportunities to counterattack during later bosses. Your character doesn't power up throughout the game, but the bosses will hit you harder and harder, leaving you with decreasing room for error.
What the fuck?
You do, however, get better as a player, and that's all you really need to break Furi. The title is meant to be the Japanese pronunciation of the English word free. So, the game has a simple and effective formula. There is a story, and it guides you from one boss to the next. But what do you do in between each encounter? You walk. Some people think that the walking sections are there to de-stress or cut the tension of the intense combat, but that's not actually true. In fact, it's the other way around. There's a making of documentary on Steam, as well as on the developer's YouTube channel. In episode 4, Émeric Toa, the creative director behind the game, shares his experience as a boxer.
Le point de départ pour les séquences de passe où on marche sur un chemin avec une musique qui est très présente et parce que moi quand j'allais faire de la boxe et notamment les jours où je faisais du ring, je mettais le casque, les écouteurs pour me motiver parce que sinon t'as peur en fait. Je dis, mais du coup tu mets cette musique là elle te booste et tu vas sur le ring et t'es un peu chaud quoi. Donc dans un sens c'est ce qu'on a un peu voulu faire avec les passages de passe.
Alongside the musical build-up, your sidekick describes your opponents like a trainer, hyping you up for your next fight in the ring.
Let me tell you some more about what this one did to you. You need to know. Then there'll be no stopping you. He is the one who got you here in the first place. He is the one who brought you down. He led the men who captured you. Hundreds of them against you. Was that fair?
It's developed by The Game Bakers, a studio based in France, and they have a really commendable design philosophy, true to their name. The talent at the forefront of Furi was selected from around the globe, such as character designer Takashi Okazaki of Afro Samurai fame. There's another interesting result of this international approach. The game wasn't originally written in any one language. It was written in both French and English simultaneously, which is honestly pretty cool. Little known fact about me, I'm a bit of a language buff. I collect languages like Thanos hunts for Infinity Stones, and I am very close to obtaining language number 5.
One to go.
Among my arsenal, there is French, and I'll be using it once or twice to complement my analysis. At the very start of the game, the protagonist gets tortured in a familiar-looking device. The man you see before you is your first opponent, the Chain. A mysterious, rabbit-headed man releases you from your restraints, returns your weapons to you, and utters the iconic phrase,
The jailer is the key. Kill him, and you'll be free.
There's only one way to go from your cell, so it's time for a fight. The Chain is the most sadistic of all the jailers, as you could tell by the torture scene. He wears 3 masks that rotate around his head, Between different battle phases, the camera pans around, and the unrelenting, watchful gaze of his mask locks onto the camera and follows it throughout the motion. All three of his masks are white versions of classics used in traditional Japanese No theater. The first of his three faces is the Onna mask. There are many different representations of the Onna, but the Waka Onna, young woman, is the most popular. It depicts a young woman between the ages of 25 and 30 with a blank expression. Her neutrality lets the performer wearing this mask convey emotions solely through gesture. The second visage he dons is the Okina, which is the oldest mask in No theater, as well as a symbol of longevity, wisdom, and experience. The Okina, or old man mask, usually depicts a cheerful elderly man and is reserved for joyous occasions. The third and final of his facades is the famous Hania mask. It's part of the Onryo category of No masks, meaning ghosts and spirits, and it is the incarnation of women turned into demons via either obsession or jealousy. The Hania is a vengeful entity. Though it may seem frightening and furious when looked at head-on, once tilted downwards, it looks tormented, sad, almost like it was crying. There's a progression throughout the fight, not just in the chain's attack pattern length and complexity, but also in his demeanor. He starts the fight with a neutral look. Yes, he taunts you, but he's observing you, provoking you, toying with you. To him, this is a warm-up. When he switches to the Okina mask, he seems happy about your attempted escape. He attacks with more vigor, longer combos, and his combat experience starts to shine through. With his capacity for cruelty, he probably takes great pleasure in trying to beat you down and shatter your hope of escaping. It's a pleasure, in fact, that simple electrocution could never emulate. And, finally, the gloves come off with the Hania mask.
There is no way you can defeat me.
He's pissed. He's loomed over and tortured you for God knows how long, leading to not only a sense of arrogance, but of superiority to you. He refuses to be defeated by his toy, the outlet for his evil. No masks serve to portray not just emotions and characters, but also to showcase the complexity of human emotions, which is surprisingly fitting. Shielded by his many faces, no one knows what the chain himself looks like, nor even what he as a person really thinks or feels. His emotional state mirrors his current mask, making it impossible for us to determine anything about the man beneath the mask. All he does throughout our interactions is play a role. He just performs, right up until the very end.
I'm gonna kill you.
By the way, the kanji for no means skill, so...
Skill issue.
After besting the chain in combat, the protagonist silently, slowly walks up to the jailer, and the power dynamic is reversed. Your shadow looks like a horned demon, and your disarmed oppressor looks weak in comparison. Before we move on, there's a familiar sight at the center of the arena that fits this theme of captivity surprisingly well, but maybe that's just me. Speaking of captivity, the next boss is called the Strap. Your creepy companion, the Voice, describes her as both a prisoner and a jailer.
You and the prisoner have a lot in common. She turned up one day, destroyed everything in her wake, and then BAM! She got caged. Now that's some jailer, right?
One noteworthy passage is that in the game's French dialogue, he says,
Mais toi et moi, on sait ce que ça fait de rester enfermé trop longtemps.
A literal translation of this quote would be, "We both know what being locked up does to you." The consequence in this context of being locked up is implicit, meaning that it's implied and it isn't directly stated. In the English dub, however, he says,
But you and me, we know that being locked up fucks you up inside.
He directly states what the consequence is, making the idea explicit because it's being explained, but also through the use of explicit language. It's a small difference, really, and I don't know if this was intentional, but the translator side of me really appreciates that little detail. Back to the Strap. According to Emeric Toa, she's based on Medusa. He dropped this quote in a gameplay video on the Game Baker's YouTube channel.
The initial inspiration was Medusa from Greek mythology.
That's it. There, actually, he just said that with no further elaboration. So, there's some obvious similarities between the strap and Medusa. The first is that the cables sticking out of the strap's head look like Medusa's snake hair. The second is that her most devastating wide-range attacks come from her head, and you cannot see her face. Historically, Medusa was portrayed as a monster due to her snake-like hair and the two other Gorgon sisters, but over time, she came to be depicted as a beautiful woman cursed with a monstrous head. Some versions of her story's end describe her slayer, the hero Perseus, cutting her head off in her sleep, which is quite unheroic, but it also adds nuance to her character. She's very powerful, capable of instantly petrifying and killing anyone close enough to look her in the eyes, but conversely, she's doomed to be shunned and ostracized by almost everyone. She's a monster, but she's also a victim. The strap goes insane and attacks anything in sight, especially the forever regenerating walls built around her, but as you fight, you grant her release. She progressively frees herself from her restraints, which in turn gives her more mobility and wider movement, allowing both of you to utilize the full extent of her massive arena. The freer she gets, the more you see of her human body, but also the more she starts to contort and move unnaturally like a monster. In the end, she undoes her own straps, but you ultimately release her from her suffering.
Well done. You put her out of her misery.
The old man's next. He's described as
A master of time, so they say.
on your way to him, there are fixed camera spots exactly like what we've seen previously. However, there is one notable exception. The camera moves once before you meet him, and only once. The camera rotates. It rotates. A rotation is a circular motion, and in fact, that's almost all there is around you. The wind turbines spinning, the different bridge segments twisting before assuming their position. There are waves in the sand on each of the small floating islands, and though we see a curvature, we don't see where the waves actually emanate from. That is, until we reach Grandpa, the line. He's standing at the center of the arena, and at the first and most obvious center of a circle formed in the sand. From the outside, the hexagons in the shield forming the dome around the arena were rotating clockwise, but inside the dome they spin counterclockwise. Like the gears in a watch or a clock, one gear spins clockwise and the adjacent gear rotates in the opposite direction. There are 6 lines marked with stones around the line, and if you were to superimpose these onto a clock, these 6 strips could mark either all the odd-numbered hours, or, if rotated, all the even hours. From the center of his sand circle, he spawns 3 layers of shields all around him. The inner and outermost circles spin clockwise, and, just like a gear, the middle layer spins counterclockwise. The old man's sword is shaped like a rectangular slab, and with the perpendicular lines sticking out of it, it looks like they could serve as a drawing compass, or a sort of stand to prop it into the sand and use its shadow and the arena as a sundial or a literal clock. One of the recommended ways to fight him in his shield phase is actually, instead of shooting your gun like a madman, to charge your shots and try to snipe the walls. In doing so, you quite literally draw a line in the sand and on Grandpa's clock. On top of that, on Fury or difficulty, he sends out shockwaves that spin clockwise. There's an unmissable emphasis on rotation and circular motion in general on this level of the prison. As a master of time, it's pretty obvious that he doesn't view time as something that flows linearly. Instead, he adheres to the circular time theory. According to Robert J. Graham, time would be a circular system in which the same events are repeated according to a cyclical pattern. The line himself paraphrases this notion.
I can't kill you, but I can remove you from my here and now, capture you and bring you back until the next cycle.
This boss is also the first one to effectively neutralize your long-range attacks entirely. Aside for the shield phase, your bullets can never reach him. He freezes time, stopping your bullets as you fire them, and adding to the myriad obstacles frozen in place at later parts of the fight. He forces you to play by his rules, his time. And in death, he sheds some light on who you are.
Look to the sky, stranger. Therein lies your answer.
Up next is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Scale. There are a few insane theories about this guy that I could come up with, one of which ties into next month's game, which I'll save for the end of the video. He wears scale armor on some parts of his body and uses harpoons as weapons. He also hides underwater for some of his attacks. The aquatic theme baked into his design ties into his name pretty obviously. His obsession with revenge could also be a reference to Ahab, the man trying to hunt down Moby Dick. One little twist though is that he dives in sewer water. When he hits you with certain attacks, your camera gets groggy. This is likely the scale's point of view 24/7. That's also why Roger Rabbit tells you to ignore him.
I'm not sure he's got much to say. He probably can't even speak at all anymore. But if he does, just ignore the crazy babble.
On your way to this boss, he describes this place.
Take a good look, my friend. Years of evolution, culture, civilization, great intellect, wonders of nature. Bam! Wiped out in one single impact. One.
And then the scale greets you like this.
Look at the filth around you. Darkness. Look at me. Don't look so horrified. You're staring at yourself. You did this to me. Finally. Revenge.
I think it's safe to assume that you, the stranger, were the impact. Whatever you did to his land forever destroyed it and corrupted him. Mr. Rabbit mentions using the scale as his escape plan and not you.
I searched and searched. A solution, an answer, anything. Just some hope, that I could fix this, fix him. So my plan would be flawless. But I never found a thing.
Maybe the scale is or was a stranger of sorts as well, and could have disposed of the jailers if only he was capable of reason. Regardless of his origins, he too will fall to your razor-sharp blade. Oh, and that reminds me, this boss's color palette is black and green, and one of his attacks breaks off into... After that, there's the hand. The landscape preceding the fight is a desert filled with bizarre rocks sticking out of the ground. Is it just me, or do they kind of look like fingers? What clued me into the rocks being fingers is actually some pretty cool cinematographic foreshadowing. This is one of the widest angle shots you get as you approach the arena. I thought this looked like a thumb, and the rest looked like a left hand. Take a look at one of the first shots after you kill the hand. And if you pay attention to his gloves, the fingertips are of a different color than the rest. There's a distinction from the tip and the rest of the finger by design, like the obvious rocks with two sections along our path. As for the boss himself, one of his first lines mentions courage.
He who knows no fear, knows no courage. I take mine from you. We are what we fight for.
He uses a sword and shield, There's not only a bunch of triangles in the structure of the dome, their shadows are all over the battlefield. He's named after a very specific body part. His sword looks like a powered-down Master Sword from Wind Waker. I thought this was a wee bit of a stretch at first, but the developers had absolutely no obligation to make the triangles golden under the sunlight, and that kinda settled it. Next up, the song. She's dressed as an angel, and she's the only adversary that doesn't immediately come across as confrontational.
Walk with me. It was all a mistake. The cell, the restraints, the guardians.
She empathizes with you and offers you a deal.
You can't go to my world, but you can be free here. Look at what I'm offering. This can be your home. I'll take care of you. I'll tell you the tales of my world. You will tell me yours.
You're given the option to accept her deal and watch the credits roll early, but that's not the right ending. At the game's actual end credits, the game congratulates you for beating it, but the little post-credit message you get here for accepting her truce feels half-baked. In truth, the song makes one fatal miscalculation. The stranger doesn't listen to women. Really though, she's like deception incarnate, a snake in the Garden of Eden. One quick glance at her outfit and her visor, or her shadow, and you would think she's an angel, but really she's more of a Valkyrie. Her breastplate is engraved with feathers, and she's a pretty ferocious fighter. There's an incomplete peace symbol on the elevator, and interestingly enough, she wields twin crossbows. And if you didn't know, a loaded crossbow, viewed from above, also looks like an incomplete peace symbol. The truce is considered a bad ending, because, like her incomplete symbols, ending the game here would leave a lot unanswered. Who are you? Where do you come from?
Where are your fingers?
Why are you locked up? And so, there's only one way to go for answers, and it's through her. The next floor belongs to our companion. We'll discuss this section later along with the story spoilers. Skip, jailer number 8, is the Burst. Smash, next question. Aside for the annoying traps and drones in this massive arena, I have to say that this boss's track is one of my favorites.
That was a really good try, but not quite good enough.
She's got a lot of cool tricks up her sleeve, and if the outside assistance she uses during the fight didn't make it abundantly clear already, she fights dirty.
No one said we had to play fair.
Of course, she's still no match for us.
That's enough. Assuming manual control.
But there's something unusual about the voice.
I wonder what she would have made of my plan. What chance of success she would have given it.
Even on the way here, in fact.
I like her. She's a lot like me. She's clever, and she has a plan. On a scale of 1 to 10, she's an 11, and she'd give herself a 12.
That's a total 180 compared to his stance on the song.
This one, upstairs, arrogant, self-righteous, and cool, that's her.
It feels like he holds some sort of unconditional respect or admiration towards the Burst. I sensed some chemistry here, actually, and it turns out I was right.
There is a secret Easter egg in the deep lore of the game that has not been shared that says she is the lover of the voice, which is the rabbit.
In this same interview, he also confirms that she's inspired by the sniper boss in Metal Gear Solid 3, an old man called The End. There were a few ways to beat The End, but the proper way is to sneak up on him and attack him once you reach him, which is a loop left intact in the first phases of the burst fight. The next jailer is the most dangerous of them all. The walk is par for the course. It looks almost calming, if anything, until... It may look unassuming at first, a few slashes in the sand, but as soon as you emerge from the other side, you get to see what that really was. A boulder, sliced perfectly in two. The music ramps up, and Rabbit Man really hypes up the imminent fight.
What would you do if you had an eternity to do nothing but wait? Do you keep busy? Do you daydream? Do you freak out? He trained.
When you finally cross paths with the student of the blade, the duel begins.
Let me show you.
You've relied on your trusty firearm throughout the entire game up to this point.
And it's gone!
Just like that. No guns allowed. The English name for this boss is the Edge. When you think of a sword, the edge is usually what injures people. It's also where the glorious Nippon steel is folded over 1,000 times, making it one of the most refined parts of the blade. Make no mistake, however, this guy's swordsmanship is very refined. But when it comes to bladed weapons, do you know what's even more dangerous than the edge? La pointe. That's the boss's name in French, and it also means the tip. Slashes and lacerations are wide and generally unprecise. They're still dangerous, don't get me wrong, but puncture wounds, on the other hand, are often lethal. And, well, you can't stab someone with the edge of a sword. So, both his names refer to different parts of a blade, and they both represent different aspects of this guardian's design. The edge, for his swordsmanship, his attacks, his combos, his feints, and la pointe, the tip, for your minuscule opportunity to counterattack, and for his lethal damage. This guy's good, real good, and in order to win, you have to push yourself to be even better. Now, I'm going to talk about the story and the remaining characters. I'll have to spoil everything, so now would be a great time to either play the game yourself or go watch a playthrough. Without further ado, the final jailer is The Beat. Her track is a certified banger. There's a musical theme about her. Her braids are tipped with aux cords, there are headphones built into her hat, and she has 2 speakers sticking out of her back. She uses sound waves to attack, and the traps scattered about the path resemble megaphones. The thing about The Beat is that she's the weakest of all the jailers. She also happens to be the youngest. The voice has a pretty negative opinion of her.
Don't get me wrong, she's part of this. She's an overconfident, idealistic child who dreamed she could save the world. Let me be the last wave. I will stand when the rest have fallen. She's an amateur, short-sighted, plain stupid if you ask me.
And the Guardians in general.
It's Guardians like her that make me hate this place. Why did they let her join? How many were they prepared to sacrifice?
I swear everything's gone downhill since we started hiring Zoomers, I tell you. But really though, his profound distaste for having her on the front lines is because of how young she is. She's old enough to make her own decisions, and she chose to be there among the Guardians, but she's still someone's daughter, someone with very little life experience, thinking she's doing something noble or, even worse, that she actually has a chance to stop you. Spoiler alert, she doesn't. That's what annoys the voice. He thinks that by joining the Guardians, she's literally throwing her life away, and sadly, he's right.
Please, hold my hand.
least.
Now, what did we learn thus far about the stranger?
You were a weapon, a bringer of death.
Our man on the rocks, he knew a lot. He even figured out why you were sent to us. Look at the sky, he kept saying. The dot on the sun. But no one listened. I don't know much about you. I've heard some bad stuff. And what I've seen, well...
Initiating scan. Opponent armed. Graphene composite saber. Automatic laser handgun. Range 200 meters. Capacity maximum. Heart rate 8 BPM. Maximum speed 73 kilometers per hour.
They said you were a monster.
He's not human.
Analyzing DNA. Error. DNA unknown.
He's also effectively immortal, maybe not biologically, but he can't be killed by man-made weaponry.
They didn't kill you already because they can't. Believe me, they would if they could, without blinking.
And this is baked into the core gameplay. You regenerate health by parrying attacks, and whenever you lose a health bar, you lose a, quote, life, and then just regenerate back to full health. So, the biggest thing we've learned is that the stranger should never ever ever break free.
To let you go out? That is a fate worse than death.
After killing the final jailer, the game shows us why. Uh-oh. What have we done? Everything around the protagonist decays by his mere presence. The planet was safe before we busted him out of prison. And the only reason we got out in the first place was because of the voice. He's willingly doomed his own planet, but why?
So now you know. Maybe you think I'm insane, or maybe you understand. You were my only chance. I hoped it would change you. I think it did. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is what you are going to do.
Ah, it all makes sense now. He would rather see the world end if it meant spending time with the person he loves most. He's a father, ready to condemn mankind to extinction in order to save his daughter. Oh wait, wrong game. Ah, there we go. Quick note about his outfit. He's dressed as his daughter's plushie. On his shoulder, he has a short cape with a brick wall motif which fits his role as a jailer and could also symbolize the metaphorical wall around him as he closes himself off to his fellow man and sacrifices all for the sake of the one he loves. The entirety of his motivations is fleshed out throughout the game. The voice doesn't just talk about your opponents, oh no, he shares his personal thoughts too. He has a lot of optional dialogue if you take the time to explore each floor of your mega prison. He initially comes across as a little deranged, a little quirked up.
Way down there lies a free world. A world of peace and light, where you're free as the wind. And you know what? We're going to get there. The most beautiful world of them all.
Followed by an appeal to your sense of morality.
They couldn't make sense of her. She was so wild. So they put her in a cage. Then you came along and they did even worse. Way worse. It all went so wrong. We're going to make things right again. Together.
But then, he starts being honest.
I thought about it for so long. Destruction of the world on one hand, but on the other, what about my world? Why should their world be more valuable than mine? I made my decision. I will free myself. Whatever the cost.
And he shares how he copes with his decision.
In all this madness, we're lucky to have our little routine, our safeguard. A thread of reason that we can hang on to. Yeah. Repeat after me. The jailer is the key. Kill him, and you will be free.
At this point, it's still unclear that he's a father, right up until you beat the hand.
If he really loved him, why did he come here? Why did he ever become a guardian?
Hey, wait a minute. If Roger Rabbit really loves his daughter, then why is he here? Why is he a guardian too? Thankfully, we don't have to wait very long for that answer.
She started it all. She even got me locked up.
And that also explains why he despises the song in particular. When you hesitate to finish her off, he has hope.
I did not expect that. Not from you. I think I saw you hesitate after the last fight. You, of all people. Why would you ever hesitate? It made me think. I like it. It gives me hope.
Maybe, just maybe, setting you free won't destroy humanity. You've shown that you're capable of empathy, at least to some extent. Maybe he won't have to die a minute later after all.
Tempting, isn't it? Just stay here, close our eyes, forget everything. But this is nothing compared to the real world. This is just a fancy prison that we'll rot in. I need to be alive again, even if I die a minute later.
After silencing the song, you step into the voices level. Turns out he wasn't just the architect of your escape and of mankind's demise, he was actually the architect of the prison.
All the jail worlds were built from here by a genius architect. A perfectly designed masterpiece of a prison. This impossible, impassable prison. I tried so many times to find some way out of here, but there wasn't one, except for you. If only I could have found a way out, without killing them, without freeing you. But I couldn't outsmart my greatest work.
There are little windows that offer you glimpses of each floor of the jail, and there are design elements scattered about pertaining to each level. Drones from the bursts floor, a boat from the edges level, etc. The big hologram at the center of the room is a view of the prison's exit, where his daughter is, and where you appear at the end of the game. Imagine having to spend an eternity confined to a room, knowing where your child is, but being condemned to never ever see her ever again. That is true torture. He says he's taken care of the jailer on this floor, but really it's no secret that he was the guardian posted here. This is where he talks the most.
This, my friend, is what we are fighting for. Did I tell you already how much I love my world? It's not perfect, but I love it. And the people who live there. One in particular. And slowly that ancient animal part of my brain took over. The urge that made me fast when she was in danger, that kept me awake when she was sick. The architect gave up, and the father came up with a plan.
As you leave and he describes a thin line, using the game's auto-walk feature will actually have you walk that thin line.
I know what you're thinking. There's a thin line between love and madness.
There is one final piece of info regarding his daughter.
How can someone get so into something that nothing else matters? I tried so hard to stay and finish my work for years. But you know what I could never forget? Her laughter.
And, unfortunately, freeing you proves him right.
So much dedication, training, willpower. And yet they fell, one after another. There is no justice in the world. No second chances, no hand of God. We can only trust in ourselves and hope it's enough.
The best mankind had to offer could barely slow you down. There was no hope of ever stopping you. So, the best thing the voice could have done during his lifetime in his eyes is set you loose, in hopes he could see his daughter again. In the end, that's all that really matters. I played in the PS4 version of Furi, so after earning my freedom, there was only one place left to go, the tower. There, we learned the stranger's name, at least the name used by the player base.
Acquiring rider.
We cross a very long Triforce-shaped structure packed full of riders and return to our mothership. If you want to count the peace deal as an actual option, then this will be our second and final choice: to destroy the Earth or to cancel our invasion. The game doesn't really offer any judgment as to which option you select. In truth, the choice is yours alone, and neither of the two endings can clearly be determined as being the quote true ending. Choosing to fight back against the mothership, though, results in an additional boss fight. This duel is the opposite of the Edge. He locked you into close quarters combat, but now you can no longer use your sword. Well, hey, at least you have upgraded firepower.
I'm a fire in my laser!
In the Xbox version of the game, a new challenger, the Flame, ambushes you at the entrance to the tower. In the Steam and PS4 versions, the Flame fight is bundled in the One More Fight DLC package, and as such, there are no story cutscenes before nor after this battle, which is a damn shame. The plus side, if you play on PC or PS4, is that the One More Fight package actually unlocks 2 more fights instead of 1. Anyhow, the Flame battle being sort of cut content from the main game garnered mixed reception. On the Game Baker's YouTube channel, where I got the cutscene footage, some people are glad that of all the bosses in the game, this is the one that didn't make the cut, because this would be a boss between the Beat and the Star. A surprising number of commenters talk about how Ryder looks too focused and too, quote, cold for this fight. Considering that you have the option to betray your mothership, everyone just sort of assumes that Ryder feels remorseful after killing the Beat, so having him appear cold-blooded in between both story beats seems illogical. Those people are what I like to call
Wrong.
Ryder's an alien. He doesn't have the same sense of morality we do. Not only that, when he kills the Beat, she asks him to hold her hand, and he clearly couldn't care less. Just because we as players have empathy for her doesn't mean Ryder does. The only time he shows any hesitation is when cutting down the song. For the rest of the game, his focus is aligned with the voices. They want to get out. As for the Flame, he and Ryder clearly have history.
This is my vengeance.
Contrary to popular belief, I don't think Ryder has amnesia. Just because he doesn't speak or show us flashbacks doesn't mean that he remembers nothing. In fact, Ryder must remember quite a lot, such as how to operate his device atop the tower, which he does effortlessly on his first try. With that in mind, Ryder must also remember this guy, and he knows that he's going to have to kill the Flame to reach the top of the tower. I think that it makes perfect sense for him to look this, quote, cold and ruthless throughout the fight. It's self-defense, and it's also the culmination of your experience as a player. You look this focused and badass because you've become focused and badass. You've gotten good, kid. There's also one line in the fight that explains the Flame's motivations for fighting you.
For Senna, for Eden, for demons, for the ones who fell.
Ryder clearly wasn't a very great guest on our planet, but that line and how the stakes are so personal crystallized the fact that this battle cannot end without bloodshed. There's no room for remorse. Speaking of DLC, the super boss Bernard is an absolute beast. There's also another DLC which lets you play as a female rider. It's called Onimusha, which is Japanese for female warrior, an aptly chosen title. She shifts between two stances, one with very nimble movement and weak damage, or one who has no invincibility frames, low mobility, in exchange for hitting like a truck. This new rider reinvents how you play the game, and shifting between her stances, as well as combat in general, builds up a gauge that literally lets you go Super Saiyan. It's basically a new game mode. What better excuse could you possibly want to dive back into Furi? Oh, and before I forget, remember this guy? I told you earlier about a wacky theory I had. You see, the scale shares a lot of similarities with someone else. They both live underground. The entrance to their caves is a sewer pipe. There's bioluminescent vegetation. They occasionally speak nonsense. They both have round helmets. And both of their helmets get sliced vertically.
Hey there, guys. What's up?